in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, like there's like scenes with Aunt May where Aunt May's like, here, take this money for your birthday. And Peter's like, no. And then she gets mad at him. She shows like a real human emotion, like that she's not just a flat cardboard character, that she's actually a complex human, even though she's not even in the movie that much, but they developed her so well that she feels like a real person.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Out of the Box Podcast, where Steve and I, your host, get to talk about outside of the box ideas. If this is your first time, this is a channel that basically we talk about all sorts of things, from spirituality all the way to depression to whatever you can think of that's outside of the box. That's what we talk about here. And so we love to know any suggestions that you have. Please leave them down below in the comment section. We'd like to know what other topics you would like for us to talk about. The topic for today is going to be movies, modern day movies. And really with this topic, we just want to explore different areas, maybe do a little bit of criticism, constructive criticism on what we're seeing in movies today, and maybe things that could essentially improve our visual experience in movies. So, Seal, if you want to kick it off.
All right. Yeah, so I guess we could talk about the pandemic of sequels and reboots. You know, how like most movies these days, like I would even go not even like 75%, I would even go up to like almost 90% of movies these days seem like they're sequels, prequels, or remakes. And there's hardly anything original. Like I'm thinking for the past like 2 or 3 years, the only original films I can think of are by one of my favorite directors, Christopher Nolan, who made like Tenet, Interstellar, Dunkirk, you know. Like the other movies though, it's like Marvel movies, DC movies, Fast and Furious movies. Hey,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I
What
know
do
a
you
little
think?
bit about that one. I just went to see the Fast and Furious 9.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, it's really interesting just because, I mean, you just know what to expect, basically. Like it's not anything that takes you outside of your element. Basically everything that happens throughout the movie, sometimes it's almost exaggerated to the point where they try to give the viewer what they want to see. It's almost like, oh, they want more explosions, they want more girls, they want more cars. And so it's understandable, but I think they miss out a little bit on the storyline that sometimes gives life to the whole movie, the characters, the scenes, and that's where it revolves, right? And usually the stories revolve around the message of family, and we're all family, we ride together, we die together. But I think it just missed out a little bit on the impactfulness that it could have had with emotions. I think it was lacking a little bit of emotion, of natural flow, where they're just throwing out, action scene after action scene without giving some rest to, solidify, or how they say whenever you're cooking meat, to marinate the meat. It wasn't giving it time to marinate. They were just trying to cook it real quick and try to get the product out fast.
Yeah, you
right?
feel like it's too rushed. Like they're not taking their time to develop their characters, and it just kind of like things happen. Like, but the things happen, but you don't feel emotionally invested. It just kind of like explosions, comedic line, maybe like a short dramatic scene, but then interrupt that with a comedy line again, and then back to action again. Like I haven't seen that movie, but I've kind of noticed that trend in new movies. And it's actually a trend. I'm going to see if you recognize this term right here. Let me share this. It's called bathos. Does that sound familiar to you?
No, it doesn't.
Real quick, bathos was a literary term created by a poet called Alexander Pope. And he basically noticed in poetry, even in the 1700s, he noticed that certain poems are going away from drama, and they were doing this new trend of like having a dramatic thing and then interrupting it with like a comedic kind of thing. So it kind of like ruined it. And his argument was that poetry was getting ruined because poems used to be serious and have deep meanings and stuff. But these newer poems, what they were doing is they're having that deep meaning, but then they interrupted any chances of that developing any further with like a comedic line or some type of exaggerated thing that was ridiculous. And it's also like defined as anticlimax created by an unintentional lapse in mood from the sublime to ridiculous. And you see that in movies a lot, you know, it's like for example, like the Marvel movies. And don't get me wrong, like I actually enjoy and genuinely find some of the Marvel movies entertaining, right? Like Ant-Man and the Wasp, I accept it for what it is. It's kind of like a comedy action movie, and I enjoyed it because of that. Like it wasn't boring; it entertained me.
You that's what you're expecting to receive from the movie.
And so like in like a Marvel movie, even in like the more serious ones like Avengers Endgame or Infinity War, there'd be certain scenes where you'd have like a dramatic scene, right? And it sets like this kind of like drama tone where it's like serious. But then all of a sudden they ruin it with like a comedic one-liner or some type of comedic thing happening. And then all of a sudden that mood goes from like serious to like nothing, like just like it's not important anymore. It kind of sends the message of like, oh, this was an important character moment, but it doesn't matter because it's all kind of a joke anyways. At least that's, I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think like we were talking about, I kind of alluded a little bit to the emotions that sometimes it's us as humans, we naturally go through different phases of emotions throughout the day, throughout the month, throughout the year. And whenever you don't give time to flow within a movie, it just feels, like you said, forced. It feels like unnatural, and to a certain degree, you know, when we as perceivers and receivers of the message or the movie, it almost feels like we cannot connect. And there's that mismatch that the viewer gets because they're trying to get themselves into the world of the characters. And when, like you said, they say a one-liner that just completely breaks everything, and then it just leaves the viewer confused because you were expecting this to be a fundamental moment in the character's life, and then, like you said, it's just a joke, you know, and it kind of breaks it. And I definitely would agree with that aspect, that sometimes, and it's understandable, you know, sometimes people, you know, when you're creating a movie, of course you want it to be a hit. You want it to be known by everyone. And there's sort of like a formula, almost like anything, you know, to create a great song, you have to add great lyrics, great music, have a good rhythm, and boom, you have an amazing hit song, right? And same thing, I mean, with movies, they have a formula. But I think when you try to give people exactly what they want, that sometimes takes away from the genuineness of what you're trying to portray, right? Because you're trying to please everyone by becoming general. But when you don't go to a specific boundary to push outside of what's been done before, then, you know, you're just playing with what's already been done, right? It's like, you know, the story, kind of like what I said about Fast and Furious. You know what's going to happen. There's not going to be anything outside of the box. If anything, you know, those outside of box ideas are sometimes exaggerated to the point where it's like, okay, like you kind of saw it coming.
Right. And exactly, so it's not interesting. It's boring because it's boring when the stakes are not high, because you already know, based on how movies are now, that it's not gonna, there's no any real risks. Like in the Marvel, I keep going back to the Marvel movies or any comic movies now. It seems like there's not enough stakes. Like the stakes are so low, and if a character dies, well, they're probably gonna bring them back later anyways, or they're not actually dead.
Or they're never gonna die, right?
Yeah,
they're invincible. Yeah. They fall from the sky. The car exploded and they're still alive.
Yeah, and one time it's crazy. You told me one time about a movie you saw. Was it like The Color of Time? And you said there's a scene in there with a dragon that literally had nothing to do with the story at all. It just came out of nowhere.
Oh yeah. The Wrinkle in Time. The
The
Wrinkle
Wrinkle
in
in
Time.
Time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's you watch the movie and it's like they're falling from the sky, and they're trying to create this whole action scene, right? But it didn't add anything to the story. It was just,
Yeah.
an action scene that had nothing to do, nothing,
Yeah.
no importance, to the actual storyline.
Yeah. It
And
doesn't feel
so it's
genuine.
just like a waste of
Yeah.
time.
Like it was just thrown in there. Like I actually feel that way about a lot of the new Star Wars movies. I feel like, and obviously there's gonna be a lot of spoilers in this, so guys, so just be cautious about that. But like how they made Ray's grandfather the Emperor and all this crazy stuff, and it's like it just feels so full. Like they just threw it in there last minute. Like it didn't feel like any of it was planned. It just feels like they're trying to do fan service or trying to do something cool that they think people will like, but it's not
Mhm.
genuine because when you pretend to be cool, when you pretend to do something that you don't actually know what you're doing, it's going to come off as fake. And I think that's a
Yes.
lot of what's happening in movies these days. I think there's too much bathos, and I think there's not like I've noticed growing up with movies. Like the biggest example I can think of in my life is the original Spider-Man trilogy. While the first one's, you could say some parts are campy and whatnot, whatever, and the effects maybe didn't hold up. But like like Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3, and I know Spider-Man 3 is not perfect either. But at the same time, when you compare them to the way some Marvel movies are now, like even some of the Spider-Man movies now, there's a huge difference. I started noticing this
Yeah.
when I watched them again after not seeing them for like several years. I was like watching as an adult, and I started picking up on the more mature, like the more adult kind of like deeper themes in the movie in Spider-Man 2 and 3 and even 1. I was like, wow, this is a lot more mature and deeper than these newer Spider-Man movies and some of these other movies
Yeah.
because they actually have dramatic, serious, emotional scenes in those movies that actually make me feel something, and it makes me feel invested in the characters, and it makes me feel like, wow, this isn't just like a Spider-Man movie or a comic book movie. This is like a movie about human characters going through difficult times.
Yeah.
Like Spider-Man 2 is the
They
best
have
example.
weaknesses, they have strengths. Like
Yeah.
I think the most recent example, and we both watched this, Logan.
Yeah,
They
that's a good one. Yeah.
Logan, is a movie where, he was invincible, right? He could regenerate his tissues and everything like that. But when he gets older and he can't do that, it shows that side of weakness, where to the point he is risking something, right? He is risking his life. He is risking something because there is a weakness to what used to be his superpower, right? That he could come back and regenerate. And so when you add those aspects, it gives it a little bit more life to the character. It's not like, whoa, they're invincible. They just jumped off of an airplane and
Yeah,
they landed perfectly, and it doesn't give, like, the viewers can't relate. They're
yeah. Mhm.
amazed by
Yeah.
how it happened, but
All spectacle,
it
yeah.
just, yeah, like you said, they're
And
trying
tone.
to appeal to everyone, but they're losing the aspect of that
Yeah.
real genuine connection with the
And and
viewer.
and it can happen to anyone. I mean, even though Christopher Nolan's one of my favorite directors now, he like he made a movie called Dunkirk, and one of the flaw, even though it was an interesting, entertaining movie, the flaw that many people point to is that he didn't develop the characters. Some of them didn't even really have like a name. They didn't have a story, and because of that, that's probably one of my least favorite movies that he's made. Like it's not like a terrible movie, but I feel like it's missing that character development. It's missing that what you were talking about, something that invests you in the characters. And I feel like that's what's missing. Like in the new Spider-Man movies, like in Spider-Man Far From Home and Homecoming, I can't even think of that many like dramatic, serious scenes that really made me feel invested and connected to these characters. I can think of dozens of scenes like that in Spider-Man 2, 1, and 3. But in like the new ones, like there's maybe like one scene like where Tony Stark takes away his suit. It was semi-serious, but then I just didn't feel it. I don't know. Like for some reason I just didn't feel it. But in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, like there's like scenes with Aunt May where Aunt May's like, here, take this money for your birthday. And Peter's like, no. And then she gets mad at him. She shows like a real human emotion, like that she's not just a flat cardboard character, that she's actually a complex human, even though she's not even in the movie that much, but they developed her so well that she feels like a real person. She showed angst. She was like, you can take this money from me. And she gets mad at him. And then she starts like getting sad because she's thinking about Uncle Ben. And then you see in that moment that she is frustrated and angry. And that's related to Uncle Ben's death. And that even like a year later, she's still dealing with the consequences of Ben's death. And in only like a few lines that's communicated to the audience. And then the music plays a big role. It's like a serious kind of like music in the background. And then Peter's turning towards the camera and Aunt May's in the background out of focus. And then that sad piano's playing. And then you're like realizing Peter's like he doesn't even have to say anything. You can see it on his face. Like he feels guilty. He still carries that guilt from Uncle Ben's death. And like do you ever see a deep message like that in new movies today? I don't.
It's kind of rare. It's kind of rare, to be honest.
Yeah.
To see that, just because one, I think primarily it's just that a lot of people have gone with the formula of what works, right?
Yeah.
Like, I want to create a movie. I'm going to invest time and money, and I just want to do what works. And so there's no experimentation with emotions, with character building, with, that sort of stuff. It's kind of like, okay, they leave it on autopilot and they focus more on the advertisement of the product or the movie rather than the development of the actual movie in itself, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like it's giving like vanilla popsicles to people. The majority of people like like vanilla or chocolate, for example. But then what if you come out with a flavor like pistachio or like flower flavor or something like that, and it's something new that could become mainstream, that could become like the next chocolate flavor. But since it hasn't been tried enough, it's just been left behind, right? It's just been left as an additional flavor. And I think that's the same thing with flavors in movies. I think more people are trying to create hits and trying to create things that work instead of experimenting with something and making something artistic in itself with the movie, something that will actually move people in a different way that it has been done before. And so I think those are areas where movies today, especially blockbuster and in the mainstream movies, are lacking a little bit, just because they're trying to create hits, be liked by everyone. And so I think that's why they add those all those like comedic lines and action and all that, instead of using the simple fundamentals of building a storyline, right?
Yeah.
And so I think certainly there's that room of improvement for sure in terms of character building.
Yeah, and I'm also wondering if some of it has to do with just kind of like not really being genuine about it. And I'm talking from like over 13 years of experience of like writing scripts. There's a period where I was in that phase. I know what it's like, the phase of just trying to make something cool, something that will entertain someone. And that, because in my mind, when I first started writing scripts, I was just trying to copy other films that I saw at that time. And that was around middle school and high school. I was thinking, I want to make a Captain America movie that's like this. That's like these Hollywood movies. And so I would just kind of like think of movies when I was writing the script and trying to emulate those instead of coming with my own original characters and development and motivations. I was just going based off what I saw in the movies. And I think that's what might be happening now. I feel like they're not actually going deeper than that, because then when I went to St. Mary's University and wrote like my first original full-length script, True Love Story, and I wrote it from my own personal experiences, because the great writers, like I think Stephen King's one of them, he says the best writing is the writing you do from your personal experiences, the one that you write from your own life. And so I did that with True Love Story, and I realized it clicked. And I was like, that's the difference between genuine, realistic dialogue that's character driven And the dialogue I was writing before that, I was just trying to make it sound cool or sound like a movie, sound like a really cool movie. Because there is a difference. Because I was writing like word for word some of the conversations I had with people in real life. And once I practiced that, I realized, okay, that's how you write realistic dialogue. You kind of take inspiration from conversations you've had in your real life. And so I did that going forward after that. And then it would become this process of like having a conversation between characters in my head, pretending like I was that character. I never did that before that. And I started really trying to think of what would I say if I was in this character situation. And I would just type word for word. It could be like one line, like, yeah, that's true. Or I don't know, like things that people actually say in real life. And then I went even deeper with Love's Death and said, what would I do if I was actually in this character situation? Not what I say, but what would I actually do? What resources do I have? What resources do I not have? And how can I accomplish my goal with the lack of resources that I have? And that's how you create a compelling story that feels believable, by going based on what you think you would do, not what you think a movie character would do. And that's when I made that transition and realized I think that's what's happening with movies today. Because I look back on my movies and how they evolved, and I'm thinking maybe it's just a lack of genuineness. Maybe people aren't the writers; they're writing to make another cool movie instead of writing from their own personal feelings of what these characters would actually do in real life. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think, like you said, experimenting with stories to the point where, what if the movie ends on a bad outcome? Or, is it always supposed to be good at the end, like a happy ending? And so it makes you think, like, how far have we experimented with this kind of stuff? To
Have we
really
gone too far?
Yeah.
Have we exhausted every possible original idea?
And it's almost like a song. And I think that's how I relate it in my mind, because in a song they always tell you, so that it's interesting for people, you have to add conflict, stressful notes that sometimes don't sound too good with each other, but then resolve to sound good. So there's this motion roller coaster of the music that takes you in a conflicting situation, then resolves into a softer tone, and it gives the listener an experience over in while listening. And so the same thing goes for movies. There's that conflict resolution aspect to those things, but I think sometimes, there's always like the winning side. Sometimes it can be exaggerated with, oh, they're always winning, they're invincible, like they never die from all the things that happen, right? Nobody gets hurt. But what if one of the main characters did get hurt? What would happen? Like, I think that could teach people, and even kids who are watching the movies, the aspect of, how life sometimes is not that easy. We can't just go outside and go, break into a bank, and they make it seem so easy in the movies. But sometimes when they add that conflict, that real life situation where somebody lost an arm, and, they were the coder of the group, then what do they do? Like, well, the coder ends up finding a way to type with his feet or something. I don't know. It's adding some aspect to it, that shows kids that, or even adults in itself, that life sometimes is not that easy, and sometimes you have to go through struggles, kind of like you were saying with Spider-Man, how he had to live two lives, where Spider-Man was the hero, but Peter Parker was the shy, the weak person, right? And that shows the two worlds conflicting and wrestling with each other, which is interesting. It makes Spider-Man so interesting because when he's Peter Parker, he feels like us, right? He becomes like us, going through struggles, going through real life, having to deal with his grandfather passing away, his grandmother, not being able to pay bills, not being able to do well in love and trying to get the girl that he wants. And so it's just so interesting how everything intermingles. Not everything goes well. And I think that's one of the really cool aspects of developing a character is actually having the character go through struggles, not everything going well. Like, they get saved. They are super strong, and it's what if you show a weakness? What if there's a weakness? And I think whenever somebody has a weakness, like Superman, kryptonite, if he was really Superman, he would rule the world, right? Like he would be invincible. But then there's kryptonite, and that in itself shows that he can have a moment of weakness.
It makes
being the Superman that he is, there's one thing that makes him weak. And so I think that gets, interesting, I think for people.
Yeah, definitely, dude. My final thoughts would be like, the most boring character you could possibly make is a character that does not struggle at all, has no weaknesses, and just glides through the plot. And the plot happens to them. They don't affect the plot at all. The plot just happens to them, and they just swim on through it. Because, like, I think a lot of the movies now are they're making it too easy for the characters, and I think it's actually it might be lazy writing. I don't know, because sometimes when you're writing, you're just like, I don't want to have to worry about thinking about how they're going to overcome this obstacle. I'm just going to come up with this excuse, and hopefully the audience buys it. But that doesn't work, because audiences can see right through that stuff, man. And I think movies back then, like Spider-Man 2, for example, what made that movie so compelling wasn't even the fact that it was Peter Parker and Spider-Man, because they're already doing that with the new one right now. They're showing him as Peter and they're showing him as Spider-Man. It's not interesting. It's boring because they're not showing him struggling. In Spider-Man 2, they actually showed him struggling. Like one bad thing happened after the other. He gets fired. He's late for class. He's worried about not graduating from college because of that. And then now he has to deal with Dr. Octopus killing people. On The Dark Knight, for example, Batman was hopeless throughout the whole movie. He wasn't able to stop the Joker from any of the stuff. And even when he did stop the Joker, the Joker still won because he overtook Harvey Dent. So it's like he's still kind of lost in a way. And I feel like movies these days, they just don't, they're not hard enough on the characters. Like I heard a video essay person on YouTube say once, the most interesting characters are the ones that you make go through the most hardships, And I feel like that's probably what's missing.
Yeah, the struggle.
Yeah,
which is what adds the interest and connects the most, because I think we all can identify that life hasn't always been easy, right? And then for those who have, it's interesting because sometimes they grow up and they realize life sometimes can be hard, and there is a lot of things that one does go through. And so or even just seeing it from the community, you see that there's people who hunger, there's people who had somebody passed away, and so things like that really hit home for the viewers and for those reading the story, or however the story is expressed through.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening today. If you are here towards the end of the video, please feel free to give it a like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this, where we talk about outside of the box ideas. And until next time, we will see you then. Dennis.